Thank you, everyone, for joining us for the next episode. God willing, we're bringing out many more coming forward. But before we start today, I really wanted to take a moment of silence for the day that we're at when we're recording this, which is 9/11. It's crazy. I believe it's 24 years since the first 9/11 in 2001. So just a moment of silence. Thank you. So.
Yeah, thanks for doing that. I think when thinking about that day, and it changed the trajectory of many people's lives, this whole country. And in light of recent event, I think what I remember most was how united the country was right afterwards, and how, unfortunately, disaster was able to bring people together. And it feels like more than ever we, as a country, need that sense of unity and to be able to heal. And I sure hope that those people who died did not die in vain, and that we can do the work that we need individually to try to bring people together. So thanks for that.
For sure, 100%. And with that, I want to introduce you. I know we started with the most important part, which is really acknowledging that. So this is Jacob Benzaquen. And we've been in touch for a long time now, probably when I started. Right. I think it started with that 4-unit deal, if you remember.
Yep.
I
do.
A little long time. So Jacob, I'm not going to get too detailed. I'm going to start with your name, and then tell us a little bit more about your upbringing, what got you into real estate. Obviously, when we started to where we are now, you're doing a different focus on something else. But tell me a little bit about yourself, your background.
Yeah, thanks for that. So happy to be here, really excited. I love this podcast because, like you mentioned, it's about sharing information, and we all have what to share, and we also have what to learn. So creating a medium in which people can, while they're driving in the car or whatnot, be able to listen or even watch and educate and be able to be a little bit more knowledgeable about the industry that they're in. One of my mentors will always say, you have to know a little bit more today than you did yesterday, and a little bit more tomorrow than you did today. And I think that knowledge is power, and being open to learning is very, very critical. So I love this forum. I love this. I'm a huge podcast fan in general. I eat them up while I'm driving in the car. So I always feel like I've learned something when I've finished the end of the day. So my story is very atypical. My name is Jacob Benzaquen. I was born in Venezuela.
Really?
Yeah, in South America. I speak Spanish. I am Latino. I know I don't look Latino, and I get a lot of the eyebrow raised when I start speaking Spanish to people. But I speak Spanish fluently. My family upbringing was in Venezuela as a little kid, and then my dad is a rabbi. He's retired now, but that kind of being the son of a rabbi and being a rabbi is almost like being an army brat. And so you kind of go where the wind blows sometimes. So we lived in Venezuela, lived in Israel for a little bit, lived in Panama for 3 years. But my formidable years was living in Miami, which is where I grew up. So I grew up between the age of 11 till about 18 in Miami, Florida. It was a great place to live in the 90s. It's a lot different now than what it was. And at the same time, I was able to really get a little bit of American culture, Latino culture, Jewish culture, a little bit of everything. So I've been exposed to a lot of different things throughout my lifetime, and I'm very, very thankful for those experiences. Then post-high school, I ended up going to Israel for a little bit, and then came to Baltimore to Ner Israel Rabbinical College, where a lot of people end up coming for that reason. And like a lot of people who move here for different reasons, they kind of like it. And I feel like sometimes that's the, I saw a motto once, it says Baltimore, I kind of like it. And, this town grows on you. Not necessarily it's a destination place for a lot of folks, but people who end up living here, they move for a reason, and sometimes it's temporary, and then they're like, oh, I kind of like it here. So I lived here since 2003. Thank God I have a wife, 4 beautiful children, 3 girls and a boy, and I feel very, very lucky to be part of this ecosystem community. My path to real estate was not a straight one, as it is for some folks who are in this business. I got my MBA with a focus in accounting, and wanting to make my Jewish mother happy, I joined an accounting firm. And slowly but surely, I realized that accounting wasn't my passion. I was able to do it, and I was good at it, but it wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do. And it was in 2000, and I would say 8 or 9, at the end of 2008, where we had the real estate crash, and the economy had...
Perfect timing.
Yeah, the economy had kind of gone down the toilet, and I and about 40% of the company that I work for were laid off, and it was a difficult time. There was a lot of uncertainty.
Was it a corporate company?
It was a corporate company. It was one of the big four. And to be honest with you, some of the feelings at that time, when I kind of look around how some people are talking and some of the verbiage that's being used, there's a lot of similarities to 2008, 2009. There's a lot of uncertainty, and people are questioning, what's going to be next and how things are going to turn around. And so at the time, I had a family member of mine who was a wealthy individual who would put a lot of money into the stock market, and he did not do so well during that time period, with everything that was going on.
Unless he watched the Big Short,
Correct, exactly.
Yeah.
If he was able to bet against prime mortgages. So he gave me a call and he said, listen, throughout my life I made a lot of money doing different things. The one that's always been consistent has been real estate. I want to see what opportunities are in Baltimore. And so I said, okay, let's do it. It was an opportunity. One door had closed, another one had opened, and I walked straight through it. And like a lot of young people, I had a lot of self-confidence. Some of it misguided, probably, but I had a lot of self-confidence in my ability to just do whatever it took to be successful. So we ended up buying my first single-family home downtown Baltimore. It was ease of access, ease of opportunity. Wasn't a lot of money to be able to buy a property.
This was still 2008 or 2009?
2009.
So good pricing.
Yeah, good pricing. And at the time, everyone said, you're crazy. Real estate is in the pits. And I said, okay, but this is what I got, so I'm going to go for it. Promptly after renovating that house and renting it out, an opportunity to buy 23 homes off of a short sale came up. Someone that I knew, and they were in a little bit of trouble. They were underwater, and so they had negotiated with the bank a significant price adjustment, and I bought 23 houses in one of the most difficult neighborhoods in Baltimore City, Freddie Gray neighborhood.
Ooh.
And I had absolutely no idea what I was doing, and I thought I could figure it out. I did. There were a lot of lessons learned throughout that time. Some of them were good lessons, some of them I would say not as good, in the sense that they were more costly than they were beneficial. I think any time you enter into something without knowing what it is that you're doing, you have to be ready to learn a lot of lessons. Some of them the hard way, some of them the easy way. And so I ended up taking a portfolio that was faltering. I think out of the 23 homes, about 6 of them were rented, 4 of them were paying, and the rest needed work. And so we ended up doing a few at a time, and then we got the portfolio up and running. We ended up selling that portfolio around 2021 and did pretty well with it at the height of COVID. When
Perfect timing.
Yeah.
Today's world.
Correct. Now, again, I'm not going to tell you that was my plan all along. It's just kind of things worked out that way. So in buying single-family homes, that was my first entering into real estate, and I learned a lot about people, about how real estate works in terms of leverage, in terms of true cost of renovations, upkeep, maintenance, everything from A to Z, compliance, let certificates, rental registration, and everything that involved with dealing with Baltimore City, which is quite the challenge. And around 2011, when that was stabilized, I got into my first small multifamily in Mount Vernon. I purchased a property that needed renovation. I renovated it.
What pushed you to go from single families to multifamily?
I want to sit here and tell you that I had some grand plan, but opportunity just came up. opportunity just came up, I always kept my eyes and ears open for whatever was available. There was someone that I had worked with in the past who was a wholesaler, and he picked up a property for wholesale, and he said, "Hey, do you want to buy it?" And it was in the heart of Mount Vernon. Again, Mount Vernon at the time was not what it is today, and it was a whole entire gut job. It was 7 units, and I had never done a job of that scope. I didn't know exactly what I was doing. There were some great stories associated with that. I'll tell you briefly. I had no idea about historic
the
chaps, right?
Yeah.
And that when you're in a historic neighborhood, you have to ensure that the facade is meets with historic standards.
Correct.
So silly me, I took this building on. I started renovating it. I pulled permits for everything. But the windows were old and not properly insulated. And I said, well, I can't have that. So I changed all the windows out. And the next thing I know, I have a stop work order in front of my door saying, you're not in compliance. So that was a big eye-opening. And again, like I said, a lot of these
very
lessons...
expensive windows, the historic ones.
Correct,
Very expensive.
correct. Some lessons are more expensive and more difficult than others. However, as with anything, and with any entrepreneurial, I guess, idea that a person has, you have to be able to think outside of the box, and you have to be able to realize that there's never one or two solutions to a problem. There's sometimes multiple different solutions or a combination of solutions. And I think that that's where people who are successful and enjoy the entrepreneurial world, that's part of, I think, what gives us that jolt of energy, which is, okay, I got to figure out a way to resolve this issue, and the conventional ways are not there. How am I going to be able to do that? So in that particular case, I had gotten a stop work order telling me that I had changed the windows without proper permits and that I needed to change them to historic windows.
Right. In that area, like I was talking to someone recently that's doing a project there, like the neighbors will call the city and tell them.
Sure.
Like it's very much that style of neighborhood.
Sure. So I took the time to go over to the CHAPS office. I met with the head of CHAPS, explained to him my situation, that I was unaware. And he said, "Well, again, ignorance is not an excuse. You still have to change all the windows." And then when I realized how much it was going to cost, I saw it was going to be very cost prohibitive and going to really skew the numbers on our investment. So what I did was I decided to go back to the building and kind of take some time to just think about what I'm looking at. And what I realized was that the front of the building only had maybe 7 or 8 windows. It's a building that's in an alleyway, right? And the majority of the windows are on the side of the building. That was about 25 to 30 windows.
That's a lot. Yeah.
That was a lot of windows. But then what I realized was that the street that the building is on goes east to west. So if you're driving this way.
Got it.
And if the building is here and you're driving this way, the only way you can see the windows on the side is if you turn your head backwards to take a look at those windows. So this was 2012. This is before even cell phones were as advanced as they are now. But I had a little iPad. I had a little iPad, and I had my wife drive in the car while I was videoing this me going from east to west and passing our building. And I went back to the CHAPS office, and I went back to the head of CHAPS, and I said, "Listen, I understand. I messed up. I did not know what I should have known. However, if you realize the side of the building should not be considered a facade, because the way you define the facade," and I looked at the definition in terms of how CHAPS defined it,
right,
it's something that you can see while driving. And I said, "You cannot see these windows unless you're driving by." And he thought for a moment, and he said, "That's a valid point." And he said, "Well, you can still see it when you walk, but I see where you're coming from." So then they said, "Those windows you can keep, and I'm going to ask you to paint them in a color that, in a historic color that's compliant." And by the way, that took about 4 months for the paint committee to decide which color would be appropriate.
For a second there, I thought it was Baltimore wasn't crazy, but then you just said 4 months for the paint committee. That just
correct.
Back to
There's a
Baltimore.
paint committee within CHAPS that determines whether, they help you pick the color, and I had to get it from Budecki's.
Talk about Doge.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was able to resolve a problem in a innovative way. Sometimes the only way to resolve the problem is having to pay a lot more. But that was, again, one of those situations where I said, okay, you just need to sometimes be creative and not think that every problem has either one or two solutions. Typically, it has multiple solutions. So anyways, I know that I kind of took a little bit of a left turn there in terms of some of my experiences, but that gave me a real sort of understanding that in real estate, particularly managing construction projects and managing the day-to-day, you sometimes have to be creative in order to be able to reach a solution. And when dealing with other people, you have to be creative. And I think that if you show a resolve to try to deal with a problem, even if it's not necessarily what they want to hear or the answer that they want, but you are being creative, then people are much more receptive to be able to work with you. So, the head of CHAPS realized I wasn't trying to get out of my responsibility, but I was trying to say, hey, now that it is what it is, can we find a way that will accommodate everybody? So in 2015, I entered into the world of property management. I had my own small portfolios, multifamilies, and I had an agent who called me out of the blue. I had done a number of deals with him, and he said, listen, I am selling these properties that are smaller, multifamilies, and I'm dealing with investors out of D.C., out of New York, out of L.A. They don't want to manage the property. And at the same time, this building requires proper management. Now, you can't have a staff member sitting on an 8-unit building because you can't justify the payroll, but it still needs to be managed appropriately. So he said, would you want to manage that? And again, like every opportunity that comes in front of me, I said, sure, I'll try it. And the next thing you know, JBZ Management was born. And that was my entering into the property management space. And been doing that for a number of years. And there's been a lot of ups and downs with it. Property management is not an easy business, particularly in Baltimore City. Baltimore County is a little bit easier, but in Baltimore City, there's a lot of regulation, bureaucracy, dealing with Department of Public Works, code enforcement, rental registration, and I like Baltimore. I like Baltimore City. I live in Baltimore City, and I like the people of Baltimore City.
I didn't know you live in the city side. I also do.
Yeah. I live in the city side, and I think that there are a number of things that could be improved upon to make the city function and as great as it can be. When you think about some of the big things that you need in order for a city to be successful in real estate, when you think about some other cities out there where real estate is very, very strong, you think about there's waterfront properties. Okay, Baltimore has waterfront properties. You have large employers.
Right.
Baltimore has a significant amount of large employers, whether it's Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid.
Proximity to D.C.
You have proximity to D.C. You have tremendous universities, hospitals, and you have strong sports teams, the Ravens, Orioles. So all the variables are there, right? And so I think that what's missing now is the efficiency in terms of government to be able to allow for things to move efficiently and to get crime under control. And I think if those two things happen, Baltimore City should flourish. And there are pockets where it does, and then there are pockets where it needs that help. So
correct.
Yeah. So that's been my journey. Recently, I joined Micasa Title, which is a title firm that does all sorts of closings. Our fearless leader, Mark Gaylor, is also Latino, as I am. We don't necessarily push so much the Latino business, but we have significant amount of Latino clients based on the fact that we both speak Spanish, and there's a tremendous influx right now of Latino money going into the real estate in Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Maryland in general. You have a lot of investors you have a lot of folks who came 20, 30 years ago and established small businesses, whether it's landscaping, construction, et cetera, et cetera. They've grown and they've done well for themselves, and now they're buying real estate. And so we are very lucky to have that. And so I've, at this point, seen a lot of aspects of real estate, whether it's the purchasing and owning real estate, management, the title side of things, and obviously working with you, seeing what it's like to deal with agents and with buying and selling. So I think I've seen a lot. I have not seen it all. I feel like there's always more to learn and to see. But that's been my journey. I know that's kind of long, but sometimes my journey is, when I try to explain my journey in an elevator ride, it just never, like, unless the elevator ride is to the 100th floor, it never ends up being long enough.
I'll tell you something is that if your journey, if your story was shorter, I don't know if that's a good thing. Having experiences in life in general, I'm saying, is just, you might as well use out your time that we're here.
Yeah, I think for your average person, they have a story and they have a journey. They sometimes don't necessarily give themselves credit for it. Like, not everybody was born in South America and lived in 4 different countries. But your story is very unique. How you got to where you are today is very unique. No matter if you're a guy who does welding in Nebraska, or you're a food vendor in India, like, everyone has a story. And I think that it's critical to own your story and to realize that there's a reason for you being where you are, and how you're going to get to the next step. All of that is part of your past and your present. So I'm a big fan of letting people be able to tell their story, because I think it's interesting and there's always what to learn from people.
100%. And to really touch on a couple questions, I think what I'm seeing a lot from investors, especially out-of-state investors, like you said, when you're doing management, a lot of people, they're not sure if investing in Baltimore, just practically speaking, and I'm sure you've seen a lot, they're not sure if there's actually a strategy to build a portfolio that you're able to really hold on to long term. Whether you're doing self-management or third-party, both of those come with their challenges, obviously. Is it actually, in a practical way, like, does it actually make sense to invest in Baltimore? Someone out of state is looking at Baltimore, and we both know the challenges here. Like you said, I think politically it's really, really hard. And there's a lot of problems right now with getting subsidy because it's a lot slower. And we're going to do a podcast next week with someone specifically talking about subsidy. So the question becomes, while doing specifically management, when you're really working with other people, is there really a way to succeed? Or, like I've seen unfortunately recently with many owners, is it just a dream that people are not acting on? Or is it something else? Is it that people are not executing? What have you seen to tell our viewers, like, could you make money? And the people that you've seen not making money, what mistakes have you seen with the time that you've been doing management, or even for your own properties?
It's a great question. It's really a great question. I think the simple answer is yes, you can be successful. I think as with anything else, you need to be intentional. The clients that, from a management perspective, we've had the most success with have been very well-educated clients. Clients who know the business in and out. The ones that I've found to be unsuccessful are people who either have analyzed an investment basically using a spreadsheet, which, ironically speaking, I was talking to an investor earlier this morning, and I said, Baltimore is not the kind of place where you can invest based on a spreadsheet. And if you're going to just invest based on numbers on a spreadsheet, you are not going to do well. Baltimore is very, very unique in that sense. I'm sure there are other cities that fit that profile as well. But Baltimore is very, very unique in that sense. And so you need to be very, very intentional. And what that means is understanding all aspects from your purchase, all through renovations and construction, the time it takes to lease a unit, the neighborhood that you're in, and understanding what the expectations are, having the right contractor, having the right lender, having the right team, essentially. In order to be able to do it successfully, you have to have a team. And again, that doesn't mean people who are necessarily working for you. But for example, if you have a good title company, right, you have a good management company, you have a good real estate agent, that you can bounce ideas and thoughts and questions and things that you may not understand, and be curious, right, and be able to try to question almost every assumption that you have, and feel good about the fact that you at this point know and understand what you're getting yourself into. I think that in order to be successful in Baltimore, you have to have a short and a long-term plan, and you need to be able to have enough margin for the things that you might not expect to happen, right? So, for example, if your contractor says to you, listen, we can have this house turned around in 3 weeks, you need to give yourself enough time to be able to do it in 2.5, 3 months. Not because it takes that long, but because if it takes that long, well, do you have enough money in reserves to be able to pay that mortgage while the contract is dragging along? Well, this just went up in value, or this cost, you got an estimate from the contractor for $50,000 to renovate this house. You need to have $65,000 in the account just for the renovations. I'm not even talking about for the debt.
So have you seen a lot of owners that, like, you give them, not you or whatever, let's say you have a contract, you give them an estimate, they started the work, it took longer, and then they weren't able to pay the rest, and then I know other ownership groups that happened to, and then the manager got stiffed 50 grand they had to front for contractors and stuff like that.
So that can be the challenge, right? And again, this is where I think people can fall into the trap of, that's the blessing and the curse of Baltimore, right? Which is the ease of entry is significant because the prices are not what they are in some other similar cities. And so what happens is, well, I have this amount of money, I want to get into real estate, right? And they'll listen to podcasts or go to events where they say, hey, with just $20,000, you can go into a real estate deal, right? And the answer is, it could be, if you have the right financing in place to be able to give you buffers for this kind of deal. But if not, then that $20,000 will end up going into air, and you're going to lose all of it. And so I think that it's absolutely critical to be able to run through simulations of, well, what if this takes longer? What if this doesn't go the way it's supposed to go, right? I mean, I had a client who bought a property that was triplex, right? Had 3 units. When he bought it off of auction, and the use and occupancy, and it had a vacant notice on it that he's like, well, I'm just going to deal with it. Well, based on the square footage and based on the parking and all these other things, when he said, hey, it was vacant, but now I'm trying to fix it, and I'm trying to get it back to the 3 units, they said, well, you can only have 2 units. Well, that throws all the numbers to the wind, right? And without knowing that ahead of time and saying, well, if it's only 2 units, can I rent one of those units? I guess now that it's going to have 2 floors instead of 1 floor, can I rent that for how much? And will I still make my numbers? Those are the type of questions that you need to be able to ask yourself. And unfortunately, a lot of times you don't find that out until it's too late, or the people who don't ask those questions are not seasoned enough, and you learn the hard way. And so it's important and critical to have a good team, right? So, for example, you're a well-seasoned real estate agent. Hey, Yankee, I'm buying this off of an auction. What do you think? Hey, Jacob, I'm buying this off of an auction. Okay, does it have a vacant notice? Are the 3 units currently, do they have 3 meters? And you're able to, the questions that you and I ask naturally from being in this business for almost 20 years, they don't necessarily know that, but having the ear of someone that you can trust, and obviously being able to lean on them, and then they being able to lean on you for business, that's obviously critical. That's what makes the world go around, and that's the ecosystem that we live in. But I think that it's possible to be successful in Baltimore. You need to be very intentional, and you need to be able to make sure that your numbers are really, I would say, have margins of error, right? You have enough margin of error. And lastly, you have to be able to accept that sometimes the deal is going to flop. And you need to be able to be okay with that financially, not mentally or emotionally, financially. Because if you're at the point where if this deal doesn't work, this kind of sets you back, that could be the end of your real estate career. And I'm a big proponent that anyone and everyone who should invest in real estate. I'm a true believer of that. At this point, I've done it for so long that I believe that is one of the greatest ways for people to be able to create wealth for themselves, for their family, and for their children. And so if you have the means and you have the time and the capacity, you should do it. But again, do it with wisdom, and do it with patience, and do it with support.
Right. I think some of the challenging part coming into Baltimore, aside from dealing with Baltimore's vendors specifically, I mean, I know from my own experience, I had a vendor that I called to a property and they broke something. And now the job just went but they didn't want to fix it, they just broke it. And the job just went up again. So I think the trust in vendors, I think, in my experience, is the most critical, but it takes two to tango. And to your point, what I've seen on the brokerage side of things, especially recently, is ownership's group that bought, maybe even for good pricing initially, but the expectations did not make any sense. We're going to rent this out to Section 8, we're going to get X, it's going to take us a month. Listen, I rented out one of my units to Section 8 recently. It took 3 months. Even if you get the tenant, it takes like 2 months because you have
Correct.
10 days for this, a week for that, a month for this. And if a tenant backs out last minute, no repercussion. They could just leave, and now you just wasted 2 mortgage payments if it's a single family.
Right.
On nothing.
Right. And so do you have the ability to do that? Because the banks don't want to hear that it's taking you 2 months to rent it out. And they're going to hold you to account, and they're going to hold you to make that payment. So I think that there's a lot of validity in terms of the vendors. I also think that it's like anything else. When you find the right one, you hold on to them for dear life, right? I used to say that to my staff. I said, they would, one of our leasing agents would come to me and say, hey, Jacob, this tenant has been living here, and in 3 years, we've raised his rent $30. I said, yeah, that's not great. He said, well, I think it's time to raise it to $200 because that's closer to where market rent is. I look at the tenant, I look at his profile, I'm like, I know this guy. He hasn't called once to complain about anything, not to say that he doesn't have a right to. And when he calls, he's extremely patient. He pays his rent on time. He's agreeable to work with. I think we can raise his rent a little bit, but not as much as you think, because if we lose him, we have no idea what's on the other side. And it's the same thing with vendors, right? Of a vendor that, maybe his pricing went up a little bit, but he's reliable. He calls back. If he breaks something, he fixes it. You hang on to those for dear life. And again, all of that it's a journey. It's a journey that can't happen overnight. You're not going to find the perfect vendor for AC overnight. It's going to take a while, right? And building those relationships, you could be the greatest schmoozer. You can be the nicest guy. That relationship comes with time. It's just time, and you have to go through adversity with that person. You have to overcome that adversity, and you have to know how to deal with that. Some of my longest tenured clients were like, I messed up so badly, and probably cost them money. I owned it. I figured out a way to resolve it, and they stuck around. And I think that's where a lot of times people make big mistakes, which is owning your mistakes is a gift, and it is an asset, and is one that will create loyalty from your clients and from customers. They're okay with messing up because in a day I could probably run out of fingers in terms of the things that I mess up on a regular day-to-day basis, whether it's dropping off my son too late because I left the house too late in the morning, to forgetting to pick up the dry cleaning, even though my wife asked me 6 times. The amount of mistakes that your average person makes is staggering. Own them, pivot, and deal with them, right? And I think that successful people ask themselves this question every time they mess up. Okay, what do I do next? Not, why did I mess up and what's wrong with me, or I can't fix this. It's, what do I do next?
Forward thinking.
Correct. It's again, it's giving yourself a little bit of grace and understanding that people are much more forgiving than you give them credit for, as long as you're honest with them, right? So I think that is critical. And in real estate, and in every aspect of real estate, it can be very, very tempting and easy a lot of times to blame it on someone else or say it's, I mean, I can remember thinking back to a tenant that we had, very, very challenging tenant, and we finally got the eviction date to evict them, and something happened with scheduling where one property manager thought that the other one was going to be there for the eviction. We missed the eviction date.
The sheriff rolls around, sees no one, and leaves.
Correct. Sheriff rolls around and leaves. By the way, as an aside, I was at a real estate event earlier today where the mayor was there, and someone picked up their hand to ask him a question. And they said, we manage a multifamily building, and the sheriff came in one entrance and we were in another. We waited for 3.5 hours. He finally showed up to another entrance. He waited for 10 seconds, then he left. And we're right back to starting point. And it's a frustrating thing to have to deal with. You spend all that time, you spend all those resources trying to, do an eviction correctly, and your margin of error is this much.
There's a lack of care from the government level to people that are just, if you're not, and this is just my opinion, if you're not a company that's been greasing their pockets, then they will not care about you, and that's a problem. Like, why? And that's another reason why people don't want to invest in Baltimore, which is, there's, to your point, I agree with you a lot. Like, even just from the assets that I own myself, if you have to get ready to deal with a lot of garbage, you can make a lot of money, you have to get ready to deal with a lot of garbage, like the case of the sheriff.
Yeah, so we messed up, and client calls me because he's been waiting for this day. The way we wait for our birthdays or our favorite team playing in the Super Bowl. And I had to make that difficult phone call and say, we messed up. And we missed the date. And so we had to reschedule it. It took another 5 weeks.
Yeah.
And I had to eat some costs out of my pocket. He's been with us ever since. He has never left. And it wasn't because of all the things I did well. It was because when I messed up, I owned it. I took accountability for it, and I said, "Hey, I'm here to be of service." And we messed up, and so I think that there's a lot of virtue to that. Now, kind of to the point that you were talking about in terms of government and dealing with all of that, I actually confronted the mayor as he was leaving this event, and first of all, I with a little bit of chutzpah that I get from my mother. God bless her. I said, Mr. Mayor, first of all, hello. My name is Jacob Benzaquen. I want to let you know I don't agree with you on most policies that you have. However, you are my mayor, and I pray for your success every day. And I hope that you do well, everything that you do well, because it affects every person in the city, including my family and friends. So the first thing I wanted to establish with him was that the discourse that we're having, we can completely and totally disagree.
Respect.
And correct. Mutual respect. You're a human being. You're made in the image of God, and for that alone, you deserve respect. And so I wanted to start with that because I was going to throw some stuff at him, but I wanted to tell him that I was doing it with respect and admiration. He is my mayor, and I'm going to root for him 100% while he's in office. I mean, I vote for him on the next election, but it doesn't quite matter. He is my mayor now, so I'm going to, wish him always the best. I said to him, I think that one of the most important things from a real estate perspective that us investors and people who are in this ecosystem need is a change in culture. When we walk into any government office, whether it's dealing with Section 8, whether it's dealing with DPW, whether it's dealing with the permits, rental, registration, we need to feel like the people who are in front of us work for us and not that we are asking for a favor. When I say, hey, we've been trying to get this issue resolved with this permit, I shouldn't be getting attitude. Again, as long as I'm respectful and do it nicely, right? I should be getting a response the way you would get a response if you were in Costco and you see one of the team members in Costco saying, hey, I can't find this and this. The next thing you know, they're on the walkie-talkie, they're talking to the manager, hey, did we move this product? How can we help you find it? You know, you'll get one of them saying, hey, you're buying the milk over there, I'll meet you there with that product. I know that you're not going to get that level, and I understand that. There's always going to be a gap between the private sector and the public sector. But at a minimum, to understand that your paycheck is being paid by the citizens. When I pay my taxes, when I pay property taxes, right, I'm paying for those services. I'm not one to stand on principle for the sake of standing on principle. But when I walk into government offices, I should feel like, hey, they're here to help me navigate this process. You do have government officials who do take that methodology, and for that I'm very thankful. But for your regular John Doe that works in, you know, the liens department
DMV
or the DMV or whatnot, you don't get that. And part of it has to come from up top, right? There needs to be a sense of accountability that, hey, the people who walk in through our doors, they're not a problem. They're a person that requires our attention and our customer service. And I said that to him. And again, for all I know, he might listen, he might not listen.
Did he even respond?
He did. He was thankful for that. He was thankful for you know, me giving him, you know, my thoughts on it. And I said the feeling that most people get if you talk to your average person who invests in real estate, the minute you tell them, hey, I got to deal with the permits office or with DPW, you know, you see like almost like the air gets sucked out of the room, and they're just like, oh gosh.
DPW is a mess. You saw the report.
Yeah, DPW is a mess. And again, just being, you know, completely honest and blunt, like, I don't have much faith and trust when I get a water bill that it's accurate or that it's reasonable or that if it's a problem, I can address it. And that lack of confidence breeds a lot of other things that that make people not want to come to Baltimore City.
Correct.
And that's a shame, because when you meet people in the street, Baltimore City people are good people. I happen to be a big fan of your average Baltimore City citizen. They're gritty. They have a lot of nostalgia about the history of the city, and they are very protective of the reputation of Baltimore City. They don't like Baltimore City being talked about negatively, et cetera, et cetera. They take a lot of pride in being from Baltimore. And I would like the city, in all of its glory, to reflect that. Meaning when people talk about the good old days, there's no reason why we can't have that again. But it requires everybody to step into that idea. And it starts from the top. Again, we have to do our job. We have to do our job as citizens, right? We have to do our job. And to that effect, I tell people, if you are able to get involved in any capacity, I'm involved in the Cross Country Neighborhood Association. I'm joining the board soon. And so that way you can be part of the solution. And that's part of what he told me, the mayor's like, you have to do your part, because he said, I don't control sheriff's office. Sheriff's office is outside of the purview of the mayor. So again, that's a legitimate point. It doesn't fix the problem. It doesn't address the issue, right? But that's a legitimate point.
But to your point earlier, right? Like when you're a manager, right? You could have said, I don't control the sheriff's office, so he came to the wrong entrance. But that's not the issue. The mayor has influence even if he doesn't control it. If he really wanted the system to be in a way that it helps investors, he could have influence on the sheriff. it's this is not a city that is tunnel visioned. I mean, in a way, it is because no one talks to each other. But at the same time, every department has the same exact way of looking at it. Whether it's the water department, like you said earlier, whether it's BGE, which is not even government, but I feel like it is these days, the way they run things. Like,
I mean, there are a lot of things that I really wanted to share with the mayor, you know, and to your point, at Micasa Title, we're working with a lot of Latino investors. These people are working their tails off. They are on their backs. A lot of construction happens. We all know that. That's not necessarily a big secret, right? And when I'm sitting at a closing table with one of them and they say to me, yeah, well, I'm going to do all this work and I'm not going to pull any permits because last time I pulled permits, no one answered me and no one responded and they don't have anyone in the permits office that speaks Spanish, or, you know, my broken English, and they, you know, talk down to me or they're condescending. What we've done essentially is sort of, I'm not excusing or saying that it's okay for him to not do the work with a permit, but you're creating that kind of environment. And, you know, some of them who are large buyers, one of our clients they have a construction company. They're renovating maybe, but by the time the year is over, they'll be renovating over 100 homes. Multiple crews, right? And when I speak to the owner, she says to me, they don't care about us. They don't care about our community. They don't care about what it is that we're doing. Meanwhile, the Baltimore Banner came out with an article that's saying Baltimore City, for the first time in over 20 years, hasn't lost citizens. And, right, and they gained about 700 citizens.
Yeah.
And they attributed in the article mainly to the Latino community, right?
Yeah.
So where is there a disconnect between someone in the mayor's office saying, hey, we need to have a Latino liaison, someone to be able to speak to these people who are doing the work, who are moving into our city, and figuring out what are their needs and how within the system that we already have we can meet those needs, right? I'm not saying that they should get anything special above or beyond anyone else, but are you meeting their needs, and are you talking to them in a way that they feel like they matter? And I think that, like you said, that's where there's a disconnect, where you're almost left with this notion of they don't really care. And I don't believe that. I really don't believe that they don't care.
The people that work there?
I don't believe that they don't care. I believe that there is a lack of understanding as to how they can do their job in a way that can be effective. I mean, listen, again, going back to Micasa Title for a second, you'll find me every once in a while going down to the liens department downtown in the city, right? I got to deal with, I don't have a lien certificate, we're dealing with a tax sale issue. Those people, they are working hard. They are working hard. They are hustling.
Right.
So those people who are in the lien department, they're working their tails off. And the system is antiquated. They are bombarded by the volumes. One of them, for example, the head of the department said to me, Jacob, we had 2 people leave, and it's taken me 6 weeks to get the new hires approved through HR, and then the training, and so now they're not only behind regularly, but now they're 2 people behind, and that creates this cascade, right? So there is a lack of, I think, proper systems and processes and accountability from up top.
Accountability,
right?
That's
Accountability from up top, right? And for example, you and I both know that in the private sector, if you run a business where you need 8 people and 2 people leave because they take other jobs, you better either have everybody working overtime or you hire temps until you find those 2 replacements, because you're not going to tell your clients, sorry, we can't meet your needs, because when you do that, you lose business. And I think that when you run the government, and the government essentially is a business, right? When you run a business that you, no matter what you do, you're not going to get fired and you're not going to go out of business, that can create a lot of, I think, lack of motivation and lack of accountability. And that, to me, is where the disconnect is, and it requires a strong leader and strong leadership to be able to say, I don't care that you've been working in this department for 20 years and that you have another 2 years before you retire with a pension. If you can't do the job, I'm going to find someone else and I'm going to let you go.
The question is if it's an overload of work for people that are getting paid very little. And, I mean, this is my personal opinion. As a manager, you could comment because this is more your field. But what I end up seeing with management companies and even brokerages, whatever it is that they take on too much. And that, the second, I could follow trends with management companies that have grown and busted. Like, specifically managers where it's very fee-based. And, like, the main two things I see is management companies that took on way too many properties. Yeah. And when they turn around, it's kind of like when you're really hungry and you eat, right? And then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I'm full.
Right.
You didn't really there's nothing really in between that. So what I see with many management companies, they take on. Yeah. And before they know it, they don't have enough staff. They're overloaded. They can't get rid of the business because they're getting paid. And from what it seems to me, the government here, that is the problem. And there's no motivation. So they're getting, I don't know, 50 grand. You have no clue what their salaries are, but they're overloaded.
Yeah.
And therefore, they get this attitude, but then there's also no repercussion. So, like, why not? Right? As a manager, if you don't succeed, you lose your business, so then you have to try to figure it out.
Right.
As a government employee, what happens? Nothing.
Yeah. And again, I think that the accountability aspect is tremendous because this is just part of the human condition. If you are not raised with very, very strong self-accountability, and then you put yourself in a position where you're not being held accountable, you're not going to put your all, and you're going to get what you basically see, which is the lack of motivation and the lack of execution. You're gonna see that, and so I think that accountability has to be entered into the equation. And again, you and I are not politicians. We don't know how the system works, and so I'm not going to sit here and pretend to have the answers in terms of how to execute such a plan. That's why I'm not running for office. But that is absolutely the case, right? And when you look at the deep divide between government and the private sector, it comes down to accountability.
Yep.
It comes down to accountability. A lot of times, whether it's a politician, whether it's a bureaucrat, the minute they sit and they feel comfortable with that, like no matter what, unless they do something criminal, they're going to get fired, you're going to get maybe 10, 20% efficiency out of them as opposed to 80 and 90%, right? And so there's got to be accountability. I think also, and this I don't know so much because I don't know the inner workings of the government, there's got to be a track towards improvement, financial improvement, where if you are one of those rare breeds that are just crushing things, you're going to be able to move up in the world, whether it's get paid more, get, bigger bonuses or holidays, whatever it is.
Motivation.
Right?
Yeah.
That motivation has to be there. So I think it's a balance between accountability and motivation. And right now it's not there. I mean, it's just not there. I have someone in my community who reached out to me and he said, listen, I have this gentleman, he's in his late 40s, we're trying to help him find a job. I said, okay, can you tell me a little bit about him? Okay, he gives me kind of a breakdown. He said, well, he's not very motivated, and he doesn't do well with people.
He should work at the government in Baltimore City.
So in talking to him, that's what I perked up, and I said, oh, it sounds like, I didn't suggest that. My first thought was, oh my gosh, he sounds like a government worker. And the guy paused and he said, I think he should go and apply to Baltimore City.
At least you know someone in the office, right?
Right. And again, to me that was, I'm glad my suggestion hopefully will help somebody, but at the same time, I said, if this is the standard, then we're not doing something right. So there's a place for people like that can still be efficient, but they still need to know that they have to get a certain amount of work done in order to keep their jobs, right? It might not necessarily be as difficult or challenging or demand of them as much as the private sector. And that's okay, right? That's okay. But there's a massive gap right now. The gap is tremendous. And we need to get, if this is the private sector and this is the government, we need to get the government closer to here. Okay? It may not be exactly here, but it's got to be closer to here. And I think that, again, my hopes are that I'm always optimistic. I've been called naive at times, which is fine. I like that challenge of just being optimistic that tomorrow is going to be better, even if today is not great. Again, optimism and hopefulness are not something to invest your money with, right? You need to be real about things, and you need to be careful and intentional. But from a general perspective, I don't like the gloom and doom. At the same time, it's one of those things I told the mayor. I said, you've been spending a lot of time on social media and on public discourse talking about how murders are down and the city is safer. I said, first of all, those are facts. Murders are down in Baltimore City significantly.
Correct.
And I said, kudos to you and kudos to the police and everyone else. I said, at the same time, let's be honest. I don't feel safe walking the streets of Baltimore City at night. Sometimes certain places even during the day. And so our city's not yet safe. I said, but the fact of the matter is that we are in a little bit of a better position than we were. And so we're working in the right direction. There's a lot of work still to be done, right? But I'm optimistic about the fact that, hey, the fact that you would hear that all the time, the homicides, more than one person a day. Well, we're way below that. That's something to hang your hat on.
Right.
And to say, okay, well, that's not enough. We got to do more. There's too many homeless people that need places to live. There's still too much crime that's happening where we're putting people back on the streets. And he talked to me about that, and he said, that's, again, something that judges need to be held accountable and
He's always
legislature. I understand that. And again, there are times where that deflection is legitimate because it's really out of his hands. But when you're going to take credit for the things that you don't do, but they happen in your city, you also have to take accountability for the things that you haven't been successful in, even though you're not in control of them. So that's the other side of the same coin. And
sheriff, I can't control the sheriff, but the death rate's down. So exactly what you're saying.
I said that to him. I said, listen, I understand that, and I'm not here to blame you, but at the same time, you get credit for things that you didn't do because they happened in your city under your mayorship. The other side is that you have to also, if something doesn't go well, even though you weren't necessarily directly addressing that issue, it's your city. So again, I think that it's good and it's important when you meet politicians to be able to always begin with, I respect you. I'm gonna say what's on my mind with respect and with admiration and with a sense of I want you to be successful, and I'm also going to give it to you as honestly as I can, with my point of view, because I think it's important for them to be able to hear that, whether it helps or not. We always have to try, and we always have to do the best that we can. We're not going to change things single-handedly, but I know that you're a big fan of the Rebbe, right? And so am I. And he always taught that there's a lot of power in one person. One person can truly, truly change the world, not by being powerful, but through small, small acts, right? So, for example, when I walked into your office today, I saw there was a little charity box in front. Put a little something in there. You know what? It's going to help somebody who needs it. I can do small acts to help the world around me be a better place. And sometimes it's confronting the mayor. Sometimes it's, doing a real estate deal where everybody benefits. You renovate a house and a new family moves in. We sometimes, I think, minimize the impact that we can have. We can't change the world on a global scale, but we can change our world that we live in. And, I think that that to me is ultimately, like, I think the biggest lesson I've learned in real estate, which is that you have a lot of power to do good and to be a force of good in a world that sometimes seems and feels very dark.
I think you just hit it on the head. I think while you were saying that everything came full circle, I should say, which is in some ways the name of the podcast, which is that everyone plays a part and everyone has to see that they're part of the picture. So, for example, a lot of people complain about slumlords. In some cases, it's true, but slumlords usually start somewhere. So if government's not helpful, you can't put money into your units for your tenants. Your tenant complains to the government's upset at you. It becomes this whole thing. All it takes is to try to be positive and work and try do the best that you can, and hopefully, like you said, it will relay to the party over, and things are not created in a vacuum.
Yeah. I mean, I remember one time I had a single mother of 3 children, and her roof was leaking, and the roof needed to be completely replaced. And I was dealing with a very small investor, completely cash-strapped. I knew that personally. He just had no money to fix the issue. And she called irate and called me all sorts of names, slumlord being one of them. I went to her house, and I said, you have all the right to be angry. I don't blame you one iota. I have children. I would not want them to be living under these conditions. The owner just doesn't have the money right now. Let's figure out what the next steps are. We're going to move you to another unit. We're going to move you to a different house. We're going to do a patch job, which I'm telling you right now is not going to directly address everything. We're going to make sure, number one, that you're safe, okay? Next thing you know, like, her shoulders dropped, and all of a sudden, she saw me in the way I saw her, which was as a human being, as a mother. It doesn't matter that we didn't look the same. It doesn't matter that we didn't come from similar backgrounds. It just none of that mattered, right? And I think that, like you said, there are times where circumstances are beyond our control, right? But what we do next is not. And we have the power to do something, anything. And when people see that you're trying, that is all they want. They want to be validated, that their concerns are valid, and then they want to know that if you have the ability to do something, you'll do something for them. And I think that takes a little bit of courage and vulnerability, and I think that doing that has, to me, when people tell me, did you like being a property manager? Did you like being in this business? I said, in real estate, you face a lot of challenges, and dealing with people is one of the biggest ones. It's also a gift. It teaches you how to be empathetic, compassionate, see people, meet them where they are, right? And I think that to me has been the biggest, I think, gift that I have been given in my experience doing property management and real estate and title in Baltimore City, which is meeting real people who are trying their best to better themselves and the lives of their families. Everyone is, for the most part, everyone is doing the best that they can, okay? And they're trying. And so meet people where they are, talk to them with empathy, take time to understand them, and you'll see that there's a lot less of a gap than what I think the media and the world will like us to see. I don't care what religion you are, what color of your skin, where you come from, what your sexual orientation is. We are all human beings made in the image of God who are trying our best every day, and everyone has challenges. Financial, emotional, familial, like everyone's got challenges, and we're just doing the best that we can.
100%. And I think that's a really good way to end the podcast today. Honestly, we could probably go on.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
there's really so much to talk about.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I think that there's a lot more to cover, and maybe I'll make another guest appearance at some point. Again, thank you for the opportunity.
Sure.
This is an awesome thing that you're doing. I think people want to be able to share their stories. People want to hear other people's stories, and there's what to learn from everybody. So I hope that you can keep on rocking, and I look forward to seeing how this all comes out, and I look forward to seeing the next one after mine. So
for sure. Thank you so much for being here, everyone.
Thank you.
If you have any questions, you need to reach out. Let me know. Reach out to me directly. You'll be able to reach out for Micasa. What is there? I guess Google Micasa Title.
Yeah, Google us. Phone number is 410-753-3500. But yeah, you can look us up and ask for Jacob. I will personally take good care of you. Any friend of Yankees is a friend of mine, so I'll make sure that you get the red carpet treatment.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. And
Awesome.
guys, see you next time.
Yep.